A while back, I was listening to Father Mike's podcast on YouTube, and he made a quote saying, "To experience suffering is to experience life." And that really stuck with me. Today, we're talking about adversity and how negative experiences can open the door to a new chapter. We'll get into it after I hit this music. Joining me this week is Pastor Dan Crandall of the Belgrade Avenue United Methodist Church here in my hometown, North Mankato. So, Pastor Dan, I just realized this episode comes out in the Lent season. So it comes out the day after Ash Wednesday. So it's a really good topic to talk about.
Yeah.
And quick little story about me. I had, this podcast all started off from adversity, not from the adversity of being bullied as a child, but from me, I was really active into sports. I did CrossFit, I ran marathons, I did all that stuff to abuse your body. And eventually my body said, you can't do CrossFit anymore because I ripped my shoulder apart. And I was bummed out because I lost my CrossFit family. I couldn't do CrossFit anymore because I had a hurt shoulder and the doctor says you can't do that stuff anymore. So which led me down to a path of finding something different to do. To fast forward a little bit, I found a new fitness community online, which was part of the Eric the Trainer, who also helped founded the Cry Chop Bowling program. But I joined his community, and then he actually pushed me into teaching people more about bullying, how to overcome it, and awareness. So what turned out to be a negative in my life turned out to be what we're doing here today. So, adversity can be a good thing. But when people hear the word adversity, they also think usually big life moments. And how do you define adversity in everyday situations people face?
Yeah, I think whether it's the big things or the little things, I think adversity is just anything that seems like a roadblock or anything that seems like it stops you when you're going somewhere. I always think in terms of story as a pastor. Like I tell a lot of stories, and on the side as a like an independent filmmaker on the side too. When you think about it in terms of story, every story is all about adversity. It's the usually the best stories are the ones where the character has to undergo the most adversity, where they get something like a goal or a want in their mind, and then all these obstacles are in the way, and they don't foresee the obstacles, so those obstacles are adversity. Like you said, whether it could be big things like major job loss, or little things just like, I was trying to get somewhere on time, but there was traffic and I was late or something like that. So any kind of roadblocks.
Yeah, as a pastor, I feel like you must deal with like the heavy big life moments. Um, Especially the biggest one I could think of, death of a loved one. How do you help people see the positive in that? Not trying to make light of anything, because obviously that's a dark time for people. Like, how do you comfort those type of people?
Yeah, that's a fantastic question. And there's, I always joke about this with friends that are not in religious circles, that you kind of have to be different in the head to operate well in those situations. um, I think that when people are grieving, different people grieve differently. Different people have, I don't want to say levels of grief, because that means that we're like comparing people's grief, but
Yeah.
that's not what I mean by that. But there's varying kinds, I guess, of grief is a better way of saying. And like if someone loses a loved one, sometimes they kind of know it's coming and they've prepped, even though you can't really prep, but it, it it's slightly different kind, and then, or if it's something that's out of nowhere, sudden, or sometimes that's something that's really tragic, like a, young person, or a young person passes, or something of that nature. I think there's different flavors of the approach that I can take, but really the main approach I take is presence. I don't come into a situation expecting to fix anything or change anything or influence or inspire or whatever. It's really just sit with them and kind of shut my mouth as much as possible. And I don't talk a lot. I'm naturally an introvert, which if when people see me in like on Sunday morning or something, they don't believe that. But I always kind of say, well, I'm not an extrovert. I just play one on TV kind of thing. But I'm naturally an introvert. So it's easier for me to kind of quiet down and listen and keep my thoughts to myself unless someone asks for them, you know. But the biggest thing is allowing people to have their emotions and not, not do the at least things. Well, at least you don't, or well, look at the silver lining, and those statements are usually well-meaning, but do the opposite. And so
Yeah.
I always try to let people stay in their dark places because we're afraid of dark places, but a lot of times the dark places is where the healing happens, you know? Like you and I know, like if we're exercising hard, you need to have rest days to recover. Otherwise you're really going to injure yourself. And I think emotionally dark places are those times when it it's kind of like an emotional resting place, I think. So, yeah.
Yeah. Are there like, with a lot of things that we go through, there's like, we got warning signs, like, um, for instance, we could have really negative, bad thoughts, whatever. But, dealing with like something tragic, like for myself, losing my gym community, to me, that was a big deal. But
Yeah.
it's like, oh my gosh, what's going on? But, you know, maybe we'll take a little step back. Maybe, you're the kid at school getting picked on the whole time. Nobody likes you, or your boss hates you. Is there like something a person can do to recognize that this is adversity? Because I feel like adversity is hard to pick up. You just think, well, I'm Tim Flynn, everything bad happens to me anyways. You know,
Yeah.
but is there things to look for or to reflect on, like, why is this happening? What can I do to make it better?
Sure. Yeah. There's a couple different ways I could kind of approach that question. I was bullied as a kid, growing up in the 80s and 90s. I'm I've always been a kind of a bigger guy, bigger kid, but I've always been, because I was introverted, and I've always dealt with the timidness or social anxiety,
Mhm.
timidity. And as a kid, you know, kids can be cruel and they pick up on that. And so I've always kind of grown up with that in my rearview mirror. And to the point, like in high school, I couldn't tell if people were picking on me or just being friends with me or being kind of, how
Yeah.
guys do sometimes, they kind of jest with each other. I've never really under gotten, I've never been able to pick out the difference to know which side of the line that's on. Are they accepting me and playing with me, or are they being playful, or are they teasing me and making fun of me? I still don't know. I grew up in a neighborhood where there weren't a lot of other guys around. It was most of my friends were girls up until late high school, and so I think now as an adult though, when something happens, I think I've kind of learned to take a deep breath and take a step back and go, okay, this again. What am I going to do? I There's a couple examples I can offer. There's big ones and little ones, but I guess I'll just kind of go back to a bigger one
Yeah, go ahead.
and then kind of pull it back to the small things. But being around death all the time, I don't want to say I'm used to it, but it's easier to navigate. But that said, my about 2 years ago or so, my mom passed away, and we'd moved her up. I'm from Monticello, a little town west, about half hour west of Minneapolis, and now we live in Mankato, about an hour and a half south of Minneapolis. So we moved her down here. My dad had passed away a few years earlier. And so she lived about a mile or two from us. And I was at my office late working on something one night, and I was on my way home, and I stopped to check on her because my wife couldn't get a hold of her. And so I went in there, and her door was locked. So had her house key. And so I opened it up and um, found her just kind of sitting on a bench in her doorway. She must have let her dog inside and just kind of sat down and peacefully went. And when I saw her, I just kind of, I quickly closed the door and took her pulse. And when there wasn't any, I just kind of sat down next to her and kind of went, okay, this is happening, and it took a moment, and then of course then you break down and you let your emotions come out however they come out. But that quick moment is a moment that I recognize later on when reflecting that I do that a lot. Like if something happens, I'm like, okay, this is happening. Now what? And I don't know if that's developed. I don't know if I did that intentionally or if it just happened over time because of personality or what, but that's something that I find out a lot. Like if somebody, every once in a while, being a pastor, you get all kinds of, when you do something that people don't agree with, you get, angry comments or angry emails or sometimes they'll come to your office door, which I actually appreciate more because then there's a dialogue
Yeah,
being
it's in
invited
person.
instead of
Yeah.
just they don't hide behind their keyboards. And so when people do that, especially if it's in person and they start to voice some sort of disapproval of something I've said or did or whatever, it's kind of an automatic thing where I just go, okay. And it's usually subconsciously, I think I do a deep breath, but it's a kind of a moment of pause where you breathe. And I've read somewhere that scientifically or biologically, it's kind of calming the cortisol in your in your system,
Yeah.
your fight or flight, and kind of keeping it in your developed part of your brain rather than your lizard brain. But that's something I've learned to do over time. I'm not sure whether it was intentional or just sort of happened because of a few different factors, but that's something I do in those
Yeah.
moments. Why we don't do that, I think I think we get shocked when something happens, and so we don't know what to do, and it's kind of like, and then when we're not in control, then it's automatic to just go, and lose it in some way, which sometimes is necessary, but depending on the context, I think is
Yeah. And
unhelpful.
going back to what you said a few minutes earlier about when you would talk to people, especially around, we're going to use death as a topic. Um, but you sit and listen, and it's better to listen than to say, well, here's a silver lining.
Hmm.
I think that makes sense because the last thing I want to hear is somebody tell me, well, at least they're not suffering anymore. It's like,
Right,
that's
right.
the last thing I want to hear.
Sure.
You
Yep.
know,
Yep.
when my dad passed away, thank goodness he passed away when he did. He passed away like I think a year or two before COVID because there had been no way in hell he would have survived COVID.
Yeah.
No
Yeah.
way. No
Mm.
way. He went out the way he wanted to. And I
Hmm.
felt like if he did fought the cancer, prolonged his life, he would have suffered. And thinking about that, it's like I didn't agree with my dad choosing hospice at that time. But it's like, oh my gosh, if he fought this, COVID would have kicked his butt. I mean,
Yeah.
because he had
Yeah.
he had all in his lungs and everything. There'd been no way he'd have been suffering.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
so looking at that bright side, but I have to discover that for myself. A
Yep.
pastor trying to tell me that
Oh,
probably wouldn't have helped me out at that time. But looking
yeah.
back, and that's the tricky thing about adversity. Sometimes you don't know about it. You don't see the silver lining until like years later.
Yeah. Yep.
And I'm not sure why that is. Maybe you get a chance to let things work through. But
Yeah.
then we also got we got people with mental health issues,
Yeah.
you know. So to a point for me, sometimes having someone telling me, well, here's a silver lining. But then again, we need therapists to tell us that though as
Hmm.
well. So I guess
Yeah.
when do you cross that boundary when it's okay to help show somebody that, hey, there is a silver lining to this?
Hmm. Yeah. I think the what I think is the main thing there is you have to have relational authority with people, and like I have different levels of acquaintances and friends and things, and usually most of us have very few people that we let into our inner circle of our being, our psyche, our heart, however you want to say it. Um, and those people who know us well and who we know well, I think will know us and we will know them, enough to be able to kind of feel that out when, okay, I need to say this right now, or I need to give you a hard truth right now, or a hard perspective maybe a better way of saying it right now. But there's way more people that I don't feel comfortable doing that with because there's not that relational clout built, you know? Even as a pastor, I generally don't do that kind of pushing unless either the person asks or invites it, which is sometimes happens more often than I would think. But I have to really, really know them well. And because if it's done incorrectly, it can do a lot of damage, emotional damage to people. And I think relational authority is the biggest thing. And people subconsciously, I think we know that because it's uh, kind of offensive, when you're going through
Yeah.
something hard and someone tries to pull the, I think it's called toxic positivity now. When people try to pull that on you, it's almost offensive, like what like, what are you going to
Yeah.
tell me? Yeah, so I think deep down I think we know that you have to build relational authority with people, or I don't want to make it sound like it's a goal. You build the authority so you can tell people hard truths, but you can only tell people hard truths if there is that relational clout built with
Yeah.
people. So yeah, I think we've all experienced, the somebody we've met once or twice and they just think they're a guru or something and try to speak into our lives. And we're just kind of like, screw you,
Yeah.
whatever.
Right.
So
Yeah. So we'll try to keep it a little bit more lighter now. We kind of got the death part
sure.
out of the way,
We
but
went right deep, right quick.
it went deep right away.
Yeah.
So when you're feeling overwhelmed, um, you know, we'll take it as as being like a kid. We were both kids being bullied. You're getting bullied. Your grades stink. Or you're a parent with kids who are being bullied, and when your kids getting bullied, you're trying to take care of your kids, but then your job is suffering, or your marriage could be suffering, or many multiple things be going on all at the same time.
Hmm.
How do you handle, like, what's your advice to handle being overwhelmed with those type of multiple big events going on in your life at that current situation?
Yeah, I thought we were gonna go light now. Yeah.
I thought that was
I'm
lighter than
teasing you.
death.
I'm teasing. Yeah, no, you're right. You're right. I agree with you. Yeah.
Yeah.
No, so gosh, that's a question of the ages.
Well, the
My wife
fact
and I
that
were
it's
talking
hard
about.
to, yeah, the fact that it's hard to answer means, it's normal. We all go through this.
Yeah,
It's
it's
one,
universal, definitely.
and we all
I
have
th-
our different perspectives on how to deal with it.
right, right. My wife and I were talking about this something about like along these lines a few nights ago, and 'cause there's so many, like, there's a lot of, I think a lot of people, a lot of couples, a lot of kids, I think, live in survival mode now. It's kind of a norm these days, which is heartbreaking, but it's the reality of the world we live in right now,
Hmm.
unfortunately, at least our part of the world. And I think that, I mean, it sounds cliche, but it's really true. I think that the nature has rhythms built into it. There's seasons built into it. There's times where things grow, there's times where things should rest, the ground, everything. There's night, there's day, there's all these different rhythms to nature. And I th- I believe that humans, we're part of nature. We come from nature. We're natural beings, and I think that we're meant to have rhythms in our lives as well. And survival mode takes away all those kinds of rhythms. So you're just trying to get by to the next day, trying to get to the next paycheck, get the next bill paid, get your kids, to their next birthday, get your kids to just do their next assignment, or if you're a kid, you're just maybe trying to get through the assignment. I grew up with ADHD, but didn't know I had it until I was in college, and so I think as far as like dealing with goes, my wife and I were talking about the other night, and it's kind of like I was thinking about like when you're on an airplane and you have you're about to take off and you have the announcements going off. The steward or stewardess is giving the announcements, and they say, in the event of that the cabin loses oxygen, the mask will pop down. If you have kids, you know, oxygenate yourself first. Oxygenate, I don't know if that's a word. Make sure you get oxygen first before you give it to your kids, because you have to be able to be coherent to help your kids, and I think that navigating adversity communally means we have to figure out a way to take care of ourselves first. Now, when I say first, I don't mean exclusively, because that would be selfish and neglecting things that need your care and responsibility and attention and presence, but I think a lot of times what gets lost is the rhythm and the art of working, resting, responsibility, self-care. I see a lot of emphasis on things one side or the other, but puts all the emphasis only on one thing. But
Mhm.
there needs to be a rhythm back and forth. And I grew up in a house that had a rhythm like that, but in implementing it in my own, with my wife and our 3 kids, it's very, very difficult when you're the one having to implement it rather than it was just given to you when you were a kid by your parents said it. Now it's kind of like I'm realizing the adversity is how do I do this? It's trying to solve that problem. Um, but getting through this is a very roundabout way of answering the question, but um, I think getting through those things is learning that we have to take care of ourselves first in order to take care of others well, um, and figure out how to do that in a rhythm, like build it into a daily rhythm, into almost like a system into our life. And so it's kind of like in my faith tradition, the scriptures say, "Love others as you love yourself." But you can't love others well if you don't love yourself well, according to
Mhm.
that. So it's kind of
Yep.
like you got to take care of yourself in order to take care of others, not at the expense of others, but in order to take care of them. So it's kind of yeah,
Yeah, I say this to kids a lot, especially in my seminars. It's hard to be kind to others if you don't know how to be kind to yourself.
that's good.
Because
Yeah,
how do you know how to be kind to others if you can't treat yourself right? Like,
that's
do you
real
call
good.
yourself names? Do you say I'm stupid, I'm dumb? I have a lot of kids. I work with kids. They do it to themselves
Yeah,
all the time. It's like, you know,
that's a message for all of us. Yeah.
yeah,
Mm,
you won't say it to your friends, but why do you say it to yourself? So you're not being kind.
right.
You're not a kind
Yeah.
person. You may think you're kind, but you're not being kind because you're treating yourself,
Yeah, it's good.
poorly. So, um, going back to the opening from a quote I heard, this is like a couple years ago. To experience suffering is to experience life. It's like,
Yeah.
as a pastor, Dan, what would it be like not to experience suffering? Would our lives be boring? I feel like suffering does, like for me, suffering for me opened up many doors, which I didn't know until now. But
It- yeah.
you know,
I mean, it's like the story analogy. If there's no adversity, there's no story. Nobody would watch any movies because it really wouldn't be interesting.
I suppose like
But
Rocky, movie
exactly,
Rockies.
exactly,
Yeah,
right? Yeah.
yeah.
What's your favorite Rocky movie? Sorry, ADHD moment. But
I like to call it the musical Rocky, Rocky 4, where it's pretty much one big
yeah,
musical because everything is just a song and a scene of them
yeah,
training. I like
yeah.
that one. But the first
That's
one's
good.
always still my favorite. The first one is really good.
Yeah,
After
yeah,
Rocky 4, the rest of them I didn't care for.
yeah. Yep, yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, I like 3 the best. I like 3. 4's
That's what
I mean, yeah.
Yeah, three's got the Hulk Hogan and Mr. T in it, correct?
Yeah, yeah. Yep, yep.
Yep.
But
Yeah.
see, in the beginning of that movie, in Rocky 3, and this kind of ties into what you're saying, he's on top, and there's the movie opens with this montage of him just dominating constantly all the time. And then he goes up against Mr. T, and he's supposed to but Mr. T's like this gritty, scrappy, you know, guy, and they fight, and Mr. T just absolutely dominates Rocky. I think in just a couple rounds, and
Yeah.
well, like when Rocky isn't, he has no, there's no resistance in his life. There's no adversity. There's nothing, and actually, his growth goes down. He doesn't go up, or his growth goes down in that story. And I think life would be, we wouldn't grow without adversity. Muscles don't grow without resistance. Um,
That's a good point.
and I think that if you think about it in terms of problem solving, like, okay, I want to do this, but in order to do that, I know that I'm gonna have to navigate this and this and this. How am I gonna get through that? How, it's that's life is just figuring out how you're gonna do stuff. That's adversity, that's dealing with adversity, problem solving. And sometimes the problems are very deep and emotional and big, like death. Like, how am I gonna get through this? How am I gonna plan this funeral when how am I gonna get up and speak to my family when I don't have any energy to speak interpersonally with you, right? Because I'm so, or it's whether it's the big stuff or the little things like, all right, what am I gonna have for supper? It's,
Yeah.
little. So there's adversity is just, I think, if we think of it in terms of solving problems, but if we didn't have adversity, man, atrophy. It's kind of like
Yeah.
you're either growing or you're not. There's no in between. So
I
stagnation doesn't
remember
exist. It's yeah,
I remember a while back when I saw that quote, I shared it on Facebook, and someone commented, "Well, I experienced a lot of life then." It's
yeah,
yeah, I think we all have. Um,
yeah.
what is wrapping this all up here, what is one
Mhm.
thing parents can help with their kids when they're experiencing adversity? Because a kid's not gonna understand what adversity is or that what you're going through could possibly lead you to a new door. So, for instance, say they didn't make the sports team, whatever. How can a parent kinda coach their kid on how to handle adversity?
Yeah. Well, I think it's as with anything, each child is different in how they respond to that that stimulus, that adversity. That um, I know with my 3 kids, eh, dealing with something that's maybe disappointment that has caused disappointment or some sort of a grief or some sort of a heartbreak or heartache or just angry, if it depends on what the adversity conjures up in them. Maybe they got angry because something didn't go their way or they're hurt, or one of our kids a lot of times just gets numb and doesn't want
Hmm,
to, and so regardless of the nuance of how you deal with each kid, I think one of the kind of through lines that is the same no matter what is let them talk it out. Try to get them to talk it out. If they don't want to talk it out, respect the boundary. Um, let them know you're there when they're ready to talk. Sometimes I'll kind of not trick them into talking, but you can kind of tell sometimes they say they don't want to talk, but really that's code for they want to get it off their chest, but it's painful and they
yeah.
don't know, it's too much headspace to use that they don't have right now to get it out. So in those moments I'll just sort of ask small questions about something that happened, like did somebody say something to you? Did someone do something to you? And you can just answer me yes or no. And they, and they'll eventually you'll ask those just short objective questions and they'll get to a point where they can't say yes or no. They'll be like, well, kind of. And you'll just kind of go, okay. And then they'll open up and then they'll start to talk. And then the thing, when that happens, when they do start to talk, one of the things I see parents, one pitfall I see for parents in those moments is when they do start to talk, they'll say out because they're angry or hurt, they'll say things that are outlandish. That as a parent you want to say, well, no, don't think like that, or don't say that, or But in that moment, it's important that you close the mouth and just listen, because you think about it as adults when our brains are are full of the alarm bells and our emotions are
Yeah.
overriding it, we say crazy stuff too. And a lot of the times we don't necessarily mean the specific things we say. Those are just how our we're firing at the moment. We're trying to get the emotions out, we're trying to run away from the tiger to get the cortisol out of our system, so to speak,
Yeah.
um so I think it's important in those moments to just let them talk, let them say, like our kids, a lot of times, sometimes they'll swear in those moments, and uh, we don't we don't correct them or anything. We just let it bleed, and then when it's done, we'll affirm those feelings, like, man, that sounds really hard, like, or um, if it feels right, again, kind of judging by each child how they'll receive this or not, because as a parent, oftentimes I'll say, when I was a kid, this happened to me once, and I'll tell them a story. And stories are universal
Yeah.
wall breakers. Walls come down with stories, especially when you, as a parent, you're being vulnerable. Um, there's been some times when instead of like, I'll tell them a story in those moments where from when I was growing up, when I wasn't like, when maybe it wasn't something that happened to me like it's happening to them. It's something that I did to somebody else to give them perspective. Um, and I didn't know that I was doing it, or maybe I did it, but at the time I didn't know why. And as I grew up, I realized it was wrong or something, you know? So I think the biggest thing is just letting them talk, get it out, let them get it out, you know, and just be there for them. And
Yeah.
to a certain extent, respect their boundaries, you know, because,
Yeah.
you know, they're kids. Sometimes they need wider boundaries or stricter boundaries than they think sometimes, but that's usually an exception to the rule.
Yeah.
So I think that's and
Yeah.
just vulnerability and listening by
Yep.
parents.
And then for adults that are overwhelmed, what are some good advice and tips to kind of handle those stressful situations?
Yeah. Just listening, you know, affirming. You know, when
I guess
I'm
for
if
like
I'm
for like an adult myself, say I don't have no one to talk to, like how can I personally
oh, I see.
deal
Yeah.
with the stress that's going on?
Gotcha, gotcha.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I have going back to kind of the rhythms.
Yep.
Um, I've noticed rhythms within myself on how I deal with things like that. I will usually, if it's something really heavy, I'll let myself take a night to process and kind of. It's funny enough, when you brought up Rocky, I usually think of the Rocky
Mhm.
analogy. Like when you think of like the term resilience, resilience doesn't mean you get knocked down and you get back up again. It can mean that, but you can take a moment. You can take a beat if you need to. You can take a night or two or a day or two and let yourself process, you know, bleed the emotions. I mean, as long as it's not hurting anyone or hurting yourself, you know, whatever way is most helpful, and just kind of let them sit in it. I mean, other people might say, let yourself wallow, have your pity party. I don't like those terms, but in essence, you let yourself have it. Just know, but as long as you're honest with yourself, like, okay, I'm going to let myself bleed this, and then I'm going to get up and I'm going to move and I'm going to move forward, you know? So now if you have a struggle with that, you got to know yourself well. You got to be honest with yourself. Okay, I'm only going to give myself this much. Some people have the type of personality where it's tough for them to bleed the emotions out naturally. I know some people, they have a cry or they have a moment and then they're like, okay, I feel better. And there's other people that have a cry and that actually causes them, it kind of like it gets a sorrow ball rolling and they
Yeah.
spiral downward with that. So you
Yep.
got to know yourself well, and know how you respond. And it's just kind of
Yeah.
awareness and going through life and figuring it out,
Yep.
how you deal with it. Yeah.
And for me, it's changing my environment. So I love heavy metal, I love Metallica,
Yeah.
but if I'm in a stressful situation, that's got to go. Um,
Mm,
listen to Christmas music. Christmas music, no matter what time of the season is, it's Christmas music's full of hope and joy.
mm,
I'll listen to
yeah.
that, especially when I go. If you ever see me like on the news, whatever, before I record something on television, I'm nervous as heck. I will listen to Christmas
Yeah.
music that day just to calm my nerves down because it works for me.
Wow. That's
Or
great.
if I'm home, I'm playing Madden on PlayStation. I'll play video
Yeah.
games just to get my mind away from it and to clear clear my head space and get out of that.
Sure.
Change the environment so it's more like this is happy, this is fun.
Yeah. Yeah.
That works for me though. So I know everybody's different.
That's great, like having concrete practical things like that, yeah. Like, I
Yeah.
like to exercise, I play guitar, I'll play guitar, watch movies. Yeah,
Yeah. Running was
yeah.
huge for me back when I was running marathons. Like you go out there for 4 hours, nothing but you and your mind. It was great
Yeah.
therapy, just great therapy until my knees are shot now. I can't do that
Yeah.
anymore.
Yeah, yeah.
So now just walking on up inclines on treadmills, you know, but
Yeah. Yep, that's what I do too, yeah. But
Pastor
that means
Dan, go
therapy,
ahead.
that's the other thing, like, I think
Yes.
everybody should have a good therapist. Yeah,
Yes.
so, anyway.
Pastor Dan, do you have any other final advice or thoughts on dealing with adversity? At the time you may not know that's what's going on. It's just being stressed, overwhelmed. Anything
Yeah.
you want to push out there or?
You're more valuable than you realize. I think that if we would recognize that, and whether you feel like you're alone or not, there's people that depend on you, and I think it's tough to see that. It's tough to see the value in your life when you're going through
Yeah.
hard things, when things are pushing back on you, or maybe it's a goal you have and you feel like you're going to be a failure, or the classic. I feel like by now in my life I should be farther along. That
Hmm.
statement that's with all of us. I've said that thousands of times to myself. Regardless of what it is, I think it's just a roadblock, and breathe through it, take your moment, and just keep moving. I can't promise it's gonna be fine, but I can promise you'll be fine if you keep moving, you know? And so,
Yeah. Awesome. Pastor Dan, now you are obviously, we said this many times, you're a pastor. If people want to listen to your sermons or follow you online, where can they do that?
yeah, we have, we have a tech guy awesome tech guy who takes care of all this. I'm not sure if we live stream on Facebook. I think we do, but our website, www.baumc, Belgrade Avenue United Methodist Church, baumc.org, will have links to like our social media. Like we have YouTube primarily. We'll live stream on Sunday mornings on YouTube, and then it's available instantly to watch whenever on YouTube. Um, so yeah,
Perfect. Yeah, I'll put that in the podcast description, and people watching on YouTube or if they're watching on the Empower Me television channel on Roku, you saw that go across your TV screen. So, Pastor Dan, thank you so much for coming on today.
yeah, thanks, Tim. And I just want to say quick too, I really appreciate everything you do. Like you've got my son Charlie in your class, and everything that you've done. His confidence and his demeanor in life has been revolutionized in the last 2 years that he's been in your program. And so I thank
Oh,
you
I
so
love
much for
working
all
with
you
Charlie.
do. Yeah,
Charlie's like a puzzle to me. You gotta kind of sort him out a little bit. You gotta find out what he likes to do, what he doesn't like to do, especially right
yeah,
now with training him how to become like a leader in class, like how to teach, work with our kids. And so
yeah.
you gotta get him interested. But so I think I'm figuring it out now. I kind of know what he likes. So,
You're great
it's
with
like
him.
every kid's not the same. You gotta find what they like, what they don't like. And so there's a lot of testing things. So,
Yeah. Well,
but
thank you,
yeah,
because
you bet.
it's amazing. Thank you.
Yeah. Awesome. Thanks for
Yeah,
that, Dan. All
yeah.
right. You have a good day.
You too.